Hello, and welcome to On Watch by MarketWatch. I'm Jeremy Owens. Last week, I attended NVIDIA's annual GTC Developer Conference, which was described in the press as AI Woodstock. That experience convinced me that the hype around generative artificial intelligence is not going away. So today, I welcome in one of the smartest tech investors I know, Beth Kindig, to talk about where AI is and where it's headed. Then, I want to tell you a personal story in honor of Major League Baseball's opening day. In Oakland, California, fans are going to stay in the stadium's parking lot tonight instead of attending the game happening inside. My son and I are going to be among them. But this weekend, we will attend an Oakland A's game, even as other fans continue to boycott. I'll explain the thought process behind that decision and why it speaks to a universal conundrum. What do you do when you want a product, but don't want to support the only person selling it? Plus, we'll take a quick look at the news stories we're watching right now and how they'll affect your wallet. First, let's talk about generative AI. In 2021, Beth Kindig predicted that NVIDIA would overtake Apple as the world's most valuable company. While audacious at the time, that prediction has made Kindig look smart. And I can confirm that Beth is really smart and has been for a while. I met Beth when she was just a tech worker dabbling in tech stocks, but now she has her own fund, the IO Fund, which she acts as a lead tech analyst for. So with all the NVIDIA buzz, I thought she'd be the perfect guest to help us figure out who the other AI winners could be. Now look, I have long been skeptical about the chance for generative artificial intelligence, the technology that OpenAI brought into fashion, to be a big moneymaker. Beth also has her doubts that consumers will want to pay for the technology, but she believes that businesses will. So Beth, what is behind your doubts that consumers will pay for generative AI?
Right. They're not going to open their wallet like they did for the App Store. People were constantly buying apps, paid apps. We're happy to see, the advertisements and apps. That was a big economy from the consumer side. Imagine a 180-degree complete difference for AI, which is that the people who are willing to open their wallet are those that will increase productivity, drive down costs. These are enterprises. So not only do you have a company like Microsoft, which will improve their own software suite, but their customers will be able to improve productivity and drive down costs. And those are the people that are going to open their wallets much more rapidly. And so what that does is it narrows down who the winners are going to be right out the gate. And we're already seeing that this year.
I mean, really, Beth, what we've seen so far is those really big tech companies, Microsoft, Google, Meta, paying billions of dollars to NVIDIA to get the GPUs so they can create cloud instances for artificial intelligence for their customers, so they can make new software for everybody else. But now, does that money ripple out to the rest of the tech ecosystem, or does it stay within big tech? That's one big question I have. And even within that, which members of big tech, right? Because Apple is one that's questionable to me. They deal with consumers, they don't sell to businesses as much. While companies like Microsoft and Google do have large enterprise businesses that sell to businesses. But it sounds like you believe with their strong data sets and AI tech like PyTorch and Llama 2, Meta could actually be a winner.
Yeah, those are great questions. And in order to narrow down who might succeed and why Meta might succeed, for example, I know that Ballmer from Microsoft famously said developers, developers, developers. I would say for AI, it's data sets, data sets, data sets, proprietary data sets. The company with the best data set is the one that will win. And this is another reason why you'll see some issues coming out of the private markets, the startups. Usually innovation comes from the startups. But in this case, innovation is going to come from companies like Meta who have the best, biggest data sets to train the models for the most accuracy. And that to me is what will differentiate massive winners from those that are nipping, trying to catch up. For Meta, it's such an interesting company because I've obviously been a critic in the past.
Right. You were one of the first I really talked to that was criticizing not just what Facebook was doing, but how Facebook was making money. There are a lot of people who had things to say about how Facebook was behaving and what they were allowing on their platforms, but they've always made tons of money, and you were the first one to say that's not guaranteed.
Yes, and especially for that period of time when their data was being regulated and questioned. But now looking forward, the one thing I think that is not as well covered, so to speak, about Meta The year of efficiency has gotten a lot of attention. But I think where Meta can stand out is PyTorch, Llama 2. They have really courted AI developers in terms of allowing this new wave of development. Llama's supposedly open source up until a certain revenue level. So Google can't use Llama 2, but developers and startups can. And I think that piece is really important because that's the piece that Apple doesn't have. And so why Apple doesn't, beyond me. And I think that this is where maybe the difference of Steve Jobs versus Tim Cook will come to light. Steve Jobs knew to court developers to make sure that that innovation cycle was happening. Again, the difference between AI and mobile is that the proprietary data set Meta has will always benefit them more than a startup working with Llama 2.
But how does it benefit them financially, right? They're not selling that. They're open sourcing, they're bringing developers in. I can see how it could inflate their profit margins even more. Obviously, laying off all those workers helped bolster their profit margins. And they could use the AI to make their advertising technology more efficient, but they don't have a big enterprise business. They're not selling things to businesses. So where are they getting fresh revenue from? I understand the profit margin side and the return on investment side. It's just, where's the revenue coming from?
Yeah, their average revenue per user has reached an inflection point and is starting to greatly improve right now, which is one thing we've been tracking. And it's because of the AI tools that they're able to use in order to target those people better. And where that all comes down to, the common denominator there is average revenue per user. Is that increasing? And it is right now due to some of their AI tools that are much, much more advanced than what you're seeing from ad platforms like the Trade Desk or one of those others that might have had a better competitive level playing field will lose that the more that AI starts to kick in because again Meta has the AI experience and the AI R&D departments to create better ROI for advertisers.
And for this to be a big technological revolution, we have to get beyond big tech, beyond the hardware sales, and develop these new services. Where do you kind of see greenfield for the other companies beyond big tech to take advantage of generative AI and develop new services that can actually find big revenue?
It's whoever can reduce that overhead, those operating expenses for companies. So if you were to take some examples, Salesforce, ServiceNow, those kinds of companies, the appeal and what they're trying to do and get ahead of is can they reduce, employee count for their customers, whether that's in the sales and marketing or customer service department, IT teams. So if you can start to replace those employees with automation, cybersecurity is another big one. That's where the green field is. So outside of this conversation of big tech having these large proprietary data sets that create this moat, the other area are enterprise companies that can not only reduce their internal headcount, but can help their customers reduce headcount.
That's not immediate, though. I think a lot of the programs that are being developed right now are being described as assistive rather than replacement, right? Like these are things that employees can use to try to be more proficient instead of trying to replace employees immediately.
Yes, and one great example would be cybersecurity. I would have to refresh exactly the numbers, but I want to say about $5,000 to $10,000 spend on automation can replace a security professional. So a greenfield is cybersecurity because humans are not immaculate or perfect really when it comes to cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, you can say, is a computer problem. It's cyber hacks. So automation and AI can potentially find threats faster than a human. If there's one thing I could say to anybody who is looking at AI as an investment potential is get used to semiconductors moving into AI software. I think that some of the bigger AI software players will be AI hardware players, and that's very, very unique.
Starting with NVIDIA, right? I mean, that's the thing. It's like NVIDIA has such a head start in software with CUDA, which is its AI software used with its GPUs and for developers. I was actually at GTC last week, and NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang was being very specific about we are getting into software beyond CUDA. Now, we expect to make more money from software, but that doesn't mean we're competing with the software customers, he said, specifically calling out Salesforce and ServiceNow, some of the others. He wants to make sure everybody knows they're not competing with the software makers. This is a different software layer.
Yeah, I mean, some of the areas that NVIDIA will get involved in is you can rent GPUs instead of buy them. They're obviously very expensive and complex. And then Omniverse is a simulation software platform that allows people to train robots in a virtual world, which is heads and shoulders better than trying to train them in physical world. Things like that are the first areas that we'll see NVIDIA have AI software revenue.
And what other chip makers are looking to go down that line as well that could actually succeed?
Broadcom's acquisition of VMware is very interesting from that perspective. They're trying to create a private cloud environment with VMware that allows you to also leverage on-premise data. That piece could be very interesting to the AI economy due to the value of those proprietary data sets.
And what about smaller software players are just, the ones who are really trying to get into it right now? Where are their opportunities?
I think we're very early for that. And being early sometimes is the same as being wrong. And I think some investors are seeing that happen right now. Snowflake didn't do so well at their last earnings report, MongoDB, yet why are these AI semis just surging after their reports? And it's because the difference is that some have real AI revenue and some don't. It's more speculative. But we're open and listening very closely. So some of those that do have AI revenue and are looking more promising, I can rattle them off. Palantir obviously comes to mind. Their commercial segment has done quite well.
And they've been in AI since the beginning. That's the entire thesis for Palantir since they were founded, basically.
Yeah, and all that expense from AI was probably supported from the government side. So they, had kind of the best of both worlds where the other software players could have trouble paying for some of the AI development, that the cost there. And then cybersecurity, you can just assume it's all being supported through automation because cybersecurity is a data problem now. So don't look for like a perfect little AI segment. Just look for overall revenue growth and acceleration across the board with the cybersecurity companies that are going to stand out because it's just across the whole broad suite that they offer that AI is potentially boosting those results for them.
Yeah, and obviously you do put out what you're invested in on the IO Fund website and in your newsletter, so anybody can go and check that and just make sure that you're not talking your own book too much here and get some ideas for the future. Thank you so much for joining us, Beth, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Jeremy.
We're going to take a quick break. Coming up, the financial plight of an Oakland A's fan. Stay with us. Welcome back to On Watch by MarketWatch. Before the break, we talked with Beth Kindig about AI. Now, let's talk baseball. Major League Baseball officially celebrates opening day today. I've long felt that it should be a holiday, a national holiday in the US, because I've loved baseball since I was a kid in Little League, and now that my son's in Little League, my relationship with the sport has only deepened. So last spring, I went all out. I spent thousands of dollars to take my then 7-year-old son to spring training in Arizona for a week to follow our local team, the Oakland Athletics. I then dropped even more money on special tickets to the first official weekend of the MLB season. Those tickets came with access to the field during batting practice, where A's manager Mark Kotze slapped a ground ball to my son, who dove to grab it. These experiences were truly magical. I could see his love for baseball growing, and I could feel our relationship growing stronger from the time we spent together. My heart was warm, but less than 3 weeks later, my heart froze. A's owner John Fisher, the billionaire son of the founders of The Gap, announced his intention to move the team to Las Vegas. I swore that I would never spend another cent on the A's and never return to the Oakland Coliseum, even though it is one of my favorite places on the planet. The next morning, I sat down for what I thought was going to be the hardest part of this, breaking the news to my son. I sat him down, I said the A's are planning to move to Las Vegas. But he didn't get angry or sad like I was expecting. Instead, he just said, "We can still go until they leave, right?" My frozen heart thawed at that moment. My son didn't care about the billionaire who was ripping away a cultural institution from us and our neighbors. He only cared about spending time at the ballpark with his dad. So there was no way I could give up going to A's games with him, but I was still determined not to give money to John Fisher. So this is where we get to the dilemma that many people face these days. What do you do when you want a product, but don't want to support the only person who sells it? Now look, withholding your money from a business has become much more common in recent years. Just listen to the constant cries of cancel culture for proof. In discussing my financial dilemma, I heard a lot of relevant examples, with the most common being people who want to own a Tesla car, but do not want to support Elon Musk. So I called up some professors and found there is a term for this in consumer research. Dr. June Cott, who is the Kraft Professor of Marketing at the Ivy Business School at Western University in Canada, told me that marketing researchers call it goal conflict, and there are typically two responses.
So when consumers face this kind of goal conflict, they react in a couple of ways. One is they could just ignore the situation entirely. So they just stop purchasing or they just don't go because they don't want to create that conflict. Another way is what's called in the literature as willful ignorance. So the idea that we just don't ask, don't tell. I don't want to know. I don't want to know about the company's ethical stance because I really like this table or I really like this car.
So basically, the ways to handle a situation like this tend to go to one extreme or the other. Boycott the business you don't want to support, or ignore what's bothering you and buy the thing anyway. I wondered, though, if there was a gray area, and that's what I tried to find last season. Most A's fans went with the first option, a boycott. Many immediately stopped going to games and sold their tickets on the secondary market. But that actually afforded me a middle ground. I started buying those secondhand tickets, giving my money to the owner of the tickets instead of John Fisher. And through a convoluted series of events, I even managed to attend 4 consecutive A's games for free. I also bought food at local businesses and brought that into games instead of spending money in the stadium. Other A's fans also tried to find a different path. They came together and staged a reverse boycott where fans showed up at the stadium for a random Tuesday night game that would usually have sparse attendance. Fans who attended received free shirts that read "Sell," as in sell the team to another owner who'd keep the A's in Oakland. Sell the team chants became common at the Coliseum and even on the road. So I reached out to other A's fans to find out how they were going to approach this season, which could be the A's final year in Oakland. First, I chatted with some A's fans at a preseason event put on by A's fans groups themselves in the absence of an event by the team.
Yeah, I do try to find secondary tickets because it's hard to give my money over to the A's directly.
You know, we would do tailgates, so we eat food in the parking lot and then go in rather than buy it inside.
I think I usually went to about 10 to 15 games a year, maybe a few more. And last year it was just one game to bring the dog to and trying to get as cheap as tickets possible because I don't want to give any money to the A's organization, even though I still want the product that I want. So
one of the groups that staged the reverse boycott and the Fans Fest that I attended, a nonprofit supporters group called the Oakland 68s, has its own plans for the upcoming season. Jorge Leon, the president of the group, told me he was facing a similar plight to me. He has 2 children, ages 3 and 5.
Boycott the huge games, the money-making games, right? So don't go see the Giants, the opening day, don't go there. We'll have watch parties. So we can go to like local pub or restaurant and kind of give the money that you were going to spend at the game, spend it here instead. And then, it helps the local economy as well.
A's superfan Will McNeil is known as Right Field Will because he's always in the right field bleachers at the Coliseum and sometimes in other stadiums and even at minor league games. He said he's treating this season as his last hurrah no matter what. And he's spending and traveling to enjoy it.
Honestly, that's the toughest thing. I always say, like, oh, yeah, I'll cancel, I'll do this or that. I'm basically viewing this as the last hurrah. I'm going to do road trips. I've already been to spring training. I'm going back in about a week.
Hal Gordon had another idea for me. Known as Hal the Hot Dog Guy to A's fans, Gordon sold hot dogs in the Oakland Coliseum while working his way to a PhD in economics from Cal Berkeley. He believes that fans should support a group called Schools Over Stadiums that's attempting to stand in the way of the team's move to Las Vegas to offset any spending on the A's.
I think that if you want to donate like 1 for 1 or 50 cents for every dollar that you spend at the stadium to the Nevada Teachers Union, I think that in a sense undoes it. It's sort of like buying carbon offsets.
I like that idea. I might consider paying some John Fisher offsets this season myself. Tonight for opening day, my son and I will stay in the parking lot with other A's fans as a protest against John Fisher. But this weekend, we will attend a game because I will not deny myself and my son the moments we could still have at the Coliseum. And let me tell you why. At the last game we attended in the 2023 season, my son befriended a boy a couple years older than him who was at his very first baseball game. I heard him giving the kid the same tips I had given my son about how to secure a ball from the outfielders. And late in the game, an outfielder did toss a ball into the bleachers, and I came up with it. Every dad knows what to do in this situation. I turned around and handed the ball to my son. And then my son turned around and handed the ball to his new friend and told him he could have it. I almost cried then, and I'm almost crying now just thinking about it. Because when I'm teaching my son about baseball when we go to A's games, I also hope he's learning lessons you can't teach. About empathy, about togetherness, about community. In that moment, he cared more about a kid he just met, going home from his first baseball game with a ball, than he did about having a ball of his own. Those are the kinds of moments that make everything I do as a parent worth whatever money I have to spend to get them. While John Fisher may be able to eventually take those moments away from me and my son, I'll take as many of them as I can get while I still can. Before we go, it's time for What We're Watching, a look at the news you need to know for the rest of the week and beyond. After months of turmoil, Boeing said its chief executive would step down as part of a massive shakeup in its executive ranks. The airplane maker has been rocked by quality control issues, and now will be looking for a new leader to take over at the end of the year. The search will be led by former Qualcomm CEO Steve Mollenkopf, who the board named its new chairman this week. Boeing's stock, one of just 30 components in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, has declined more than 26% so far this year, even as stock indexes have hit record highs. The stock market will be closed tomorrow for Good Friday, but that doesn't mean you should stop paying attention. The Federal Reserve's favorite inflation gauge, the Personal Consumption Expenditure Price Index, or PCE, will be revealed that day. And Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell will speak later in the morning, giving him the chance to reveal his thoughts on inflation and how it will affect the Fed. When stocks begin trading again on Monday, it'll be April Fool's Day, so watch out. But it'll also be the beginning of Financial Literacy Month, which we plan to celebrate with podcast segments that will teach you about some financial basics. For more, check us out next week. And that's it for this episode. Thanks to Beth Kindig and those who spoke to me about the Oakland A's. To keep following the latest on AI, head to MarketWatch.com. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And please do. If you like what you heard, please leave us a rating or review. It really helps others discover the show. And let us know what you want to hear from us. If there are specific topics you want to hear about for Financial Literacy Month, or you have your own dilemma like mine with the A's that you want to share about, reach us at onwatch@marketwatch.com. The show is hosted by me, Jeremy Owens, and produced by Meta Lutsoft and Jackson Cantrell. Isaac Gaines mixed this episode. Melissa Haggerty is the executive producer. We'll be back next week with a new episode, and until then, we'll be watching.